This segment of the news is brought to you by Finance of America. For all your mortgage needs, call Amy Childress or Shannon Keller at 702-372-6607.
Can certain drugs help women with breast cancer decrease the risk of developing cancer in the opposite breast? A new study in JAMA Oncology found that estrogen-blocking drugs can decrease the risk of contralateral breast cancer, especially among women whose breast cancer was estrogen receptor positive. The study found the women who took the drugs longer had a lower risk of developing cancer in their opposite breast.
This health tip is brought to you by
Desert View Hospital and Mountain Valley Physicians Group. Don't put your health on hold. We have time for you. Call us to schedule your appointment. 775-751-7100.
During the 10 years after breast cancer diagnosis, 5% of women develop cancer in their opposite breast, known as contralateral breast cancer.
We know from clinical trials that there are medications that can be used to reduce risk of contralateral breast cancer, particularly for women who are diagnosed with estrogen receptor positive breast cancer. Tamoxifen and aromatase inhibitors may be used. But we wanted to evaluate these medications in a general community healthcare setting to see how well they work in the real world.
Dr. Gretchen Gierach from the National Cancer Institute and co-authors reviewed the records of more than 7,500 women diagnosed with invasive breast cancer from 1990 to 2008. They followed the women through 2011 to see which ones developed breast cancer in the opposite breast. The researchers also recorded who took tamoxifen or aromatase inhibitors, two types of medications that block estrogen. Dr. Gierach's team found that women taking these medications for a longer period had a lower risk of contralateral breast cancer.
So for women who took the drug for 4 years or longer, we observed reduced risk of contralateral breast cancer for up to 5 years after they stopped taking the medication.
Women going through breast cancer treatment have many tough decisions to make in choosing a therapy plan. Dr. Gierach says if they decide to use these drugs and can stick with them, there are long-term benefits.
These medications, though, are known to have side effects which might impact or challenge a woman in being able to complete her full treatment course. The longer they took the drug, the greater the risk reduction, so we know that therapy duration really does make a difference.
Laura Berger, The JAMA Report.
In the study, the average age for women at the time of cancer diagnosis was 61. Well, 2 people are dead as of early this afternoon, the result of a crash. The crash occurred in a construction zone on Highway 160 in Las Vegas. The vehicles involved were a dump truck, a blue sedan, and a motorhome. The driver of the dump truck apparently lost braking power and hit the blue sedan. The dump truck that was hauling a piece of construction equipment then continued down a hill and hit the motorhome, destroying it and killing 2 occupants inside. The sedan driver and the dump truck were taken to the hospital at UMC with injuries that are not life-threatening. A refrigerator blew up inside a home over the weekend, the walls and ceiling completely destroyed by the blast. Flyer Chief Scott Lewis explains.
Very early Saturday morning, we were dispatched for an appliance fire. As crews arrived on location, they were met by the occupant who described a different type of event. As they entered the house, they did a scene size up risk assessment, and they found what gave them the general impression of that an explosion had occurred in the area of the kitchen. They immediately called me. I responded. In fact, when I did my secondary size up, I found that apparently a side-by-side refrigerator-freezer combination had sustained a explosive type force that caused significant damage not only to the appliance but to the structure, that being in the kitchen, the adjacent rooms. There was food product everywhere. There were no injuries associated with it, and the occupants had been asleep and safely exited out of the house.
Was there fire that was associated with the explosion?
There was a brief fire that ensued after the explosion. We're not sure if it was preceding the explosion or if it was after it. That's part of our ongoing investigation.
Should people be concerned about their refrigerators? Or was this something that was in the fridge possibly?
You know, it's undetermined at this very moment whether it was part of the appliance or it was contents of the appliance. But I would say this, anytime you're going to make a significant purchase such as that, do your online research, find out if there's any known hazards, if there's been any prior incidents involving a similar type of appliance that you may be purchasing.
And the Board of County Commissioners looked into a proposed audit for the Public Administrator's Office.
At one point, the public administrator and public guardian's offices were consolidated, and our ordinance reflected that fact. And then when they split, that was never clarified, or that was never, the references to ward were never taken out in regards to the public administrator. And so we caught that this go around and decided to remove that. The other point I wanted to bring up is that the statute is actually silent as to we are required. Actually, we are not required to, but we may pass an ordinance to conduct an audit, which is what's before you today. It's silent. The statute says that the county has to designate who's responsible for payment, but the public administrator is not by default the person who's responsible for it. So you can still put that responsibility on the public administrator's office if you choose to do so, but it's not mandated by the statute. But you do have to say who's responsible for it.
So you want that stated in the motion, Tim? Mr. Sutton?
What was your question, Commissioner? Sorry.
Is that something that you wanted stated in the motion?
Well, your motion was to approve the ordinance as is, and as it is currently written, the public administrator's office would be responsible for the payment of that audit should the board choose to conduct one. But there were some comments made earlier that that's a requirement that the public administrator has to do it, and you've heard the concerns by the public administrator, and I just wanted to bring to your attention that it's not required that the public administrator has to do it, just that you have to set somebody.
Okay, my motion was to amend and adopt. Lorena, that a motion stated in that fashion, can you look at that language and make it more open to sharing the cost, or to what Pam was going to do with talking to our auditor?
Well, I think the public administrator has the opportunity to come back and request
Help.
coverage for those expenses anyway, and that can be established during the budget
Okay.
if you want, without modifying the
motion.
ordinance.
Okay, will my motion work then for what you're trying to do? Okay, my motion stands.
My second will stand
wait a minute.
unless,
And that is removing the statement or other suitable persons designated in 2.52.030B.
Yes.
The amendment, right? The only amendment.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
and my second still stands.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can we get a vote?
I don't know, can we?
I hope.
Oh, so,
It's
okay.
up to you.
Really? Okay, I didn't know. It sounded like somebody else wanted.
Okay.
Well, it sounded like you wanted to do that. All right, we'll call for the vote.
Aye.
Aye.
We got 5 again.
Yes, we did.
When we return from this break, more from the Board of County Commissioners.